Living a life in full is a conversation you always wanted to have with that person who gave an amazing TED Talk, or the author of one of your favorite books, or that inspirational Olympian you always wanted to know more about. It's graduate-level conversations with those making a difference in the world and in the lives of others. This show brings you new ideas and approaches so that you can live a life in full. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Stout, and I hope you enjoy this episode. This episode is brought to you by the nonprofit I founded, the Center for Global Initiatives. The Center is an all-volunteer organization, so there are no salaries, and thus all tax-deductible donations can go to the work. While our key country partner is in Tanzania, our work is global and generally focused in the areas of education and healthcare. We also help others to get their nonprofits started or augment others' project-based initiatives. It's our goal to open-source humanitarian intervention and to help make it easier for others to do more good in the world. We are proud to have been ranked a great nonprofit every year since 2011 and to have achieved a platinum-level rating by GuideStar. Links in this episode's show notes will take you to published articles on our outcomes, a number of helpful tools, and downloadable resources, which are all free, always. Please visit us at centerforglobalinitiatives.org and be sure to watch our video at patreon.com/Dr. Chris Stout to learn more. Thanks. Welcome to another episode of Living a Life in Full. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Stout. Envision celebrating your 30th birthday by getting a bit tipsy by nightfall. Not hard to imagine, right? But how about then deciding to go out for a night run from the bar for 30 miles? Well, that's what Dean Karnazes did, and it changed his life and a lot of others as well, including mine. Allow me to acquaint you with the highlight reel of some of Dean's accomplishments. He ran 350 miles in 80 hours and 44 minutes without sleep. He completed the relay 11 times, which is a 200-mile relay race with teams of 12, but Dean ran it solo. He ran marathons to the South Pole in negative 13-degree temperatures, and I think at least part of one was in the nude, which we'll get into. He ran 50 marathons in 50 states in 50 consecutive days, finishing with the New York City Marathon, which he ran in 3 hours flat. He won the infamous Badwater ultramarathon, which is 135 miles across Death Valley in 120-degree temperatures in 2004, and has 5 other top 10 finishes between 2000 and 2008. He won the Vermont Trail 100-mile endurance run. He was the overall winner in the 4 Deserts Race Series, traversing the Antarctica, Gobi, Antarctica, and Sahara deserts. He ran on the American ultrarunning team at the World Championships in 2005 and 2008. He ran 148 miles in 24 hours on a treadmill. He is an 11-time in a row 100-mile run in 1 day silver buckle holder at the Western States Endurance Run, meaning that he ran 11 of those 11 runs were under sub-24-hour finishes. He ran 3,000 miles across the United States from Disneyland to New York City in 75 days, averaging 40 to 50 miles a day. He has raced and competed on all 7 continents at least twice, and off the trails, he swam across the San Francisco Bay, of course. He's also a New York Times bestselling author of a number of books. Dean has served as a U.S. athlete ambassador on 3 separate sports diplomacy envoys to Central Asia and South America. He's twice carried the Olympic torch and is a recipient of the President's Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition's Lifetime Achievement Award. He currently serves as the Global Ambassador of Greek Tourism. Dean has been named Competitor Magazine's Endurance Athlete of the Year on 3 occasions. Men's Fitness hailed him as one of the fittest men on the planet, and GQ magazine called him the perfect human. ESPN awarded him an ESPY as Best Outdoor Athlete of the Year. Men's Journal inducted him into their Adventure Hall of Fame, and Outside magazine named him one of the ultimate top 10 outdoor athletes and put him on the cover. He's also been on the covers of Runner's World and Wired, and Time magazine named him one of the 100 most influential people in the world. He's been featured in Newsweek, People, GQ, New York Times, USA Today, Washington Post, Forbes, Chicago Tribune, LA Times, Wall Street Journal, and the London Telegraph. Dean has appeared on The Today Show, 60 Minutes, The Late Show with David Letterman, CBS News, CNN, ESPN, The Howard Stern Show, NPR's Morning Edition, Late Night with Conan O'Brien, the BBC, and many others. He's a graduate of the University of San Francisco McLaren School of Business and Management, and is also accomplished in business with a notable professional career working for several Fortune 500 companies and startups alike. His roster of clients include Nike, Google, Sony, PepsiCo, Wells Fargo, Apple, Merck, Toyota, Starbucks, Accenture, Stanford University, Yale, J.P. Morgan Chase, McDonald's, Amazon, Facebook, and a host of others. Dean, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
I told you to embellish freely on the introduction.
No, you didn't. I tell you,
you tripped me up on
it. It's a journalistic endurance event to get through your bio, man. You know, we were talking off mic before we hit record, and I want the public to know this too. I sort of met you as an audience member. It was back about 2 decades ago, and we were in Outfitters, and you were at the time on the cover of Outside Magazine. And you very kindly autographed it to my son. And we've kept that as a valued memento to this day. And now, kind of oddly, bizarrely enough, you and I both now have sponsorship relationships with Hammer Nutrition, which is, you know, kind of what brought us back together. So I'm really thankful for both. And I guess this is, you know, certainly long overdue, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, Hammer Nutrition has been a great sponsor and, a great company that's been in it from, almost the very beginning, at least in my career, since 1987. And we've grown up together. And, and as far as the growth and the birth and the rebirth, in talking before the show, it sounds like your son is showing us both up. So,
yeah. Yeah, that's true. But again, it's certainly back with your inspiration, I think, for you, with personally for us and our family and a lot of others. And, kind of speaking of that, I mean, I think your accomplishments are quite amazing in a variety of ways, professional and athletic and everything else in between. And with that also comes a pretty good dose of inspiration. And from my research, though, and kind of looking at your origin story vis-a-vis running, and I'll fact check me throughout this conversation, but does that go back to kindergarten? Is that right, with you being a runner?
Yeah, in fact, my earliest childhood recollections are running home from kindergarten when I was 5 years old.
Uh-huh.
And I remember trying to sit still in class. And I remember the teacher saying, don't fidget, sit still, pay attention. And, what 5-year-old boy wants to do that? A 5-year-old boy wants to do just the opposite. They want to run wild and not pay attention. So I tried my best. And I remember when the bell went off, I thought, oh, I'm free. And I remember running out the door and running all the way home. I knew the path. It went through a park, and and this is in LA. But,
oh man!
I don't want to date myself. I'm old enough that LA was safe back then, and it's how I related to the world. Sitting in the classroom and having a teacher tell you how the world works was kind of sterile to me. I wanted to go out there and experience it firsthand. And I just remember as soon as that bell rang, I could go do that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the starting gun. So, and then is it true, like by about 3rd grade, then you started organizing running events with the other kids? Is that right?
I started organizing, running events that were longer than a 100-yard dash because that was the longest they had. And I said, some of us are not finished at 100 yards. So.
Well, and then again, fact check me, but so at 11, you're like a phenom, straight out of the gate. So you did the Rim to Rim Grand Canyon, and then you did Whitney. Is that right? Like at 11?
Yeah, I did. And I grew up in Southern California.
Nice.
And I lived for the outdoors. It was in a time when, outdoor exploration was not anywhere where it is today.
Mm-hmm.
And, hiking the rim to rim to rim in the Grand Canyon, it just seemed like something I was going to do, and I did it. Now, with it's kind of with the FKTs and people, looking at this as a big accomplishment to go do that, rim to rim to rim. It's kind of brought more light onto what I did. But as an 11-year-old kid, I just thought it was really cool. I thought hiking up Mount Whitney was like, if someone said that's the highest point in the contiguous U.S., I thought, oh, that'd be really cool to go up there and see what it looks like.
that's that's pretty amazing. So then you've been known to we'll get into the pardon me, the sports diplomacy and things like that, and kind of running for others. But I want to talk about running with your heart. Back at again, fact check me, San Clemente High School in cross country. You were doing a fundraiser. I think it was your first fundraising kind of a thing that you were a part of, and it was for underprivileged children. It was on a track, and you finished in just under six hours at $1 a lap. And then, for context, again, if my facts are straight, other kids ran like maybe 10 laps or 15 laps around the track. But as Dean would do, you did 105. So you kind of ran a marathon on that track. So what was that like? What was that like for others watching you doing this? I mean, were they like wanting to, shut down and go home, or what was that like for you?
No, it was kind of like a Forrest Gump moment, but solo for. I mean, most kids went out. We collected pledges, and most kids went out and said, I'm going to try to run 10 laps. Will you give me a dollar a lap? So someone said, sure, I'll pledge $1 a lap. And and I didn't stop at 10 laps. I kept going. And so all the people that had run 10 laps kind of moved to the infield of the track, and they started cheering me. And
Oh.
some of them would join me for a lap and then go sit back down. And the funniest thing is, I'll never forget going door to door collecting, my money, and people say, "Oh, did you do 10 laps?" I said, "No, I did 105." Where are you, $105? Yeah, open up that wallet.
Oh, that's great. Oh, I just love that. So from that then, between kind of that era, maybe high school and college, you kind of had a bit of a hiatus from running. And then, as I kind of queued up in the intro, there was that noteworthy 30th birthday. Tell us what happened in those ensuing years, and then tell us about that night.
Yeah, I think, I finished high school somehow. I don't know how. And then I finished college somehow. And then I finished business school. And, I had a comfortable corporate job in San Francisco. I had a company car, I had stock options, I had a fat paycheck coming in every week. And I thought this was like the recipe for happiness, get a good education, get a good job, make some money, and everything else will fall into place. And my internal life kind of unraveled as my external life was, getting more lavish, getting more accomplished. This feeling of hollowness inside me was growing. And I think I had the equivalent of a midlife crisis on my 30th birthday. And I just said, screw it. I'm leaving this bar. And my friend said, "Oh, it's midnight. Let's have another round of tequila to celebrate." And I said, "No, I'm going to run 30 miles to celebrate my 30th birthday instead." And they looked at me and they said, "But you're not a runner, you're drunk." And I said, "I am, but I'm still going to do it." And I walked out of this bar, and I'll never forget, I didn't even own running gear at the time, but I had on these comfortable silk underwear, like these silk boxer shorts.
Uh-huh.
And I pulled off my pants and threw them down the alleyway and just started running south, knowing there was this city, Half Moon Bay, that was 30 miles away. And I thought, just run to Half Moon Bay. And, 10 miles down the road, the alcohol started wearing off. And I thought, what the hell are you doing? This is a really bad idea. But it was too far to turn back at that point, and something just clicked. It was as though I had a moment with God where I felt like that is where I was supposed to be at that moment of time. It's just out there in the middle of the night running by myself in the darkness.
Wow.
And, I quit my job after that and said, I'm going to dedicate myself to running. I mean, it's what I love to do. It's not much, right? It's just running, but it's what I am. It's what I'm all about. So be a runner.
So then step us from that. So was it fitting running into the day job? Was it just, kind of totally saying goodbye to that and figuring out how to, like, did you have enough of a nest egg to live on for a while and got back into the running, or what was the mechanics behind that to be able to, survive?
Yeah, that's a good question. I really didn't have a game plan.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought, you love it and you're passionate about it, so maybe you can make a go of it. So I tried for a few years to do exactly what you said, to keep my corporate job and, run at lunch.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many times I'd go running when people were having a lunch meeting. I'd go running. I'd come back to the office. I'd go to this sink. There was this one sink where no one could see me. And I kind of sponge off in the sink, put my suit back on, and go back to my job.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And then finally, after doing that, actually the genesis of what happened in my career is, I thought I wanted to write a book just because it was like a goal,
Mm-hmm.
before you die, write a book, run a marathon, go skydiving,
Right.
try sushi, write a book.
Yeah.
And so I wrote a book and I thought, okay, if 10 of my buddies buy this, I'll be lucky. And it just became like a sensation, like an overnight, New York Times bestseller. And that's when I realized, hey, there's power in what you're doing. Even though, you finish a 100-mile race, you don't get a prize. You don't get money. You get a belt buckle.
Right. Right. And
But I thought yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and that was Ultramarathon Man. That was the book, right?
That was my first book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And when that happened, I thought, you don't need a job. Why have a regular job? It's just dragging you down.
So, step us through going from that night on your 30th birthday to ultras. I mean, were you running in organized marathons? Were you running with club teams? I'm guessing there weren't sponsorships right out of the gate. So, how did all that start? Kind of conspire and come together?
Yeah, no, I mean, I ran 30 miles and I remember the next week I couldn't even walk. But when my muscle soreness went away, I remember going to like a Big Five and buying some running shoes.
Uh-huh.
And I started running. I started running from my house out to the Golden Gate Bridge because I was in San Francisco. And that was about 5 or 6 miles. And I thought it was like badass because I prided myself, no one ever passes me. Like I pass people, no one ever passes me. And one day I was running back to my house, and if you know San Francisco, no matter where you live, you got to run over a hill or two.
Exactly. I mean, the whole thing's hill repeats. Yeah.
It's hill repeats, exactly. And I was running up my favorite hill, and these two guys just blew by me as though I was standing still. And these guys were like a different species. And I thought, wow, what the heck? And they were wearing packs. I come to learn they're hydration packs. But I just remember they had packs on, and they just left me in the dust, kind of choking on their fumes. And I really wanted to talk to them, but I thought I'll never see them again. They disappeared over the top of the hill. Well, when I got to the top of the hill, they're up there doing push-ups. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to talk to these guys. Yeah. And I said to them, you guys training for a race? They weren't very talkative. And then they said, yeah. And I said, are there hills involved? And one guy said, no. And his partner said, there are mountains involved. I'm like, mountains? Like, where is this race? How, they said, I said, is it a marathon? He said, no, it's further than a marathon. And I didn't know there was anything further than a marathon. And I said, well, how far is it? And he said, it's 50 miles. And I said, hold it, are there campgrounds along the way or, hotels? Like, where do you stop? And the guy's like, no, buddy, the gun goes off when you start running and you finish when you cross the finish line. That's when you stop. And his buddy kind of elbowed him and said, if you cross the finish line. And they kind of looked at me like, there's no way this joker will ever cross that finish line. And they just turned around and ran off.
Wow.
So I thought I got to learn about this race, and I went to the library, and I don't know how old you are, but you're probably about my age. You remember the Dewey Decimal System?
Oh, sure.
The libraries, like microfilm.
Yeah.
I found this race on microfilm when it was out near Sacramento. So I went out and did this race, this 50-mile race, and it was the toughest thing I had ever done. I mean, I thought my limbs were going to fall off. I mean, I thought your leg is just going to fall off. I mean, and somehow I finished this 50-mile race. and I'm in the medic tent, kind of wrapped in this Mylar blanket, shivering,
Right.
drool running down my chin, just I'm a complete mess. And I see these same two guys and they're high-fiving each other. And they said, we qualified. And I'm thinking, what'd you qualify for? The insane asylum? And they said, no, no, we qualified for the Western States 100-mile endurance run. And I said, hold it, 100, I mean, twice as far? And I said, but that's going to last all night. Where do you sleep? And he said, you don't sleep. I said, how do you go? He said, you put on a headlamp. And I said, where do you eat? He said, you eat when you run. You cross a river in the middle of the night. It's through the mountains. It's in the Sierra Nevada. It starts at the base of a ski resort. And you try to finish this race in under 24 hours. And I could not wrap my head around it. I mean, it was just such a huge concept to me. And the last thing they said before walking out of the tent is that, hey, buddy, you qualified as well.
Oh.
And when they said that to me, it was like a bolt of lightning went through my body. And I just knew at that moment that if I don't sign up and attempt this, I'll never live it down. Like for the rest of my life, I'll be thinking they said, hey, you qualified, you chickened out, you never did it. So I signed up for the Western States 100-mile endurance run, and that was 1994.
Wow.
And 3 decades later, I'm still running 100-mile races.
That's amazing. That is so amazing. So then like stringing those together then was the result then of Ultramarathon Man. So that was 94 for the first. Then when did Ultramarathon Man get published?
It came out in 2003.
Okay. So you had a string in between there from those to the time of putting together that manuscript. So to that point then, you said like, doing a book and eating sushi and whatever's bucket list kinds of things. But what was it that said, okay, if I've always wanted to do a book, I'm going to do it about ultra running, or I'm going to do it about my experience as being an ultra marathoner? What motivated, what was the tipping point to then say, okay, I'm going to take this seriously, I'm going to put pen to paper and put together this book?
The ultimate marathoning community was pretty small and pretty insular back then. And not a lot of people knew about ultra marathoning. And I started telling people at work, like, what happened to you? Did you get in a car accident this weekend? And I'm like, no, I ran a 100-mile race,
A car wreck would be less painful.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, and so normal people, that weren't immersed in this very small, universe of ultra runners, they were fascinated by it. They were like me the first time I heard about running 100 miles. They had so many questions, and I thought, it might make good storytelling. So one of my colleagues, she said her friend was a writer, and I said, well, how did she get into writing? She said, well, she has an agent. And I said, well, can I get the name of your friend's agent? So I got the name of this book agent, this literary agent. Uh-huh. And I called her up and I said, hey, I want to write a book. And she said, I don't represent new authors. I mean, she was ready to hang up on me. Mm-hmm. And I said, no, this is different. It's a sports memoir. She's like, new authors, it's impossible to get a book published by a new author. And I said, well, let me send you some material and take a look at it. Will you do that? So I sent her some material. She looked it over. She said, wow, this is kind of interesting. Let's send it to a publisher, a book publisher. And so I said, okay, that's fine. Almost the next day, I get a call from Penguin Books. Wow. And they said, hey, we want to buy your manuscript.
Oh, Dean. Wow.
I know. And I thought, but what does that mean? They said, well, we'll give you an advance. You write the book, and then you give it to us, and we give you the rest. Hold it. Is this a prank call?
Yeah. Who is this?
Wow. But then I learned why so many authors are just, like alcoholics and just cocaine addicts. They give you this big lump sum of money and they say, in 9 months, give us this book. And it's so tempting just to put it off. Oh, I got paid. I didn't have to do anything.
Yeah.
And then like the last week, just binge write for 24 hours a day.
Right, cram for it. Well,
Yeah.
you kind of
So
you're kind of forecasting my next question, because I was going to say, well, how does one, get author a book, and author a quality book, that becomes a New York Times bestseller, but then also fits in, distances. I mean, your training runs, are marathons. Your what you do to train is everybody else's goal. So how did you just kind of not write and actually did kind of cram toward the end and the deadline, or tell us about that?
yeah, no, actually, I mean, this is before the term multitasking even existed.
Uh-huh.
But I used to go running. I had this Motorola digital. It was so cool because it was a digital recorder. I remember first I had these cassette tapes I had to record on. It was a hassle. And
Uh-huh.
I got this brand new digital recorder. So when I'd go on these long runs, I would just dictate into this recorder. Because as you know, and anyone listening knows, when you're running, you have some of your clearest
Oh
thoughts, your
yeah.
most profound insights.
Yeah.
So I'd go out, and that's why the subtitle of Ultramarathon Man is Confessions of an All-Night Runner. I used to just go running all night, and I'd confess into this digital recorder. And then when I was on flights, flying for business, I would just type up my notes.
Wow.
And it was a good exercise because people say, I feel like I'm right with you
Hmm.
in your books. Like I feel like I'm in your shoes, and I think that's largely because I'm writing when I'm running.
Hmm. That's great. Yeah, I joke. It's funny you should say that. I mean, I feel like I'm the limping identical cousin to you, Dean, because it has been, I have a little Sony digital recorder that I always run with, and it's like I'll come back and my wife will say, how was your run, or whatever, and I say it was great, but I have like 18 voice memos to myself, so I'll see you after I shower, because I got to transcribe all these things. It just there is something about that's sort of transcendent with the running of where a lot of yours and mine and a lot of other people's heads go to places that don't happen when you just like sit down in front of a keyboard or something. So I totally get what you mean, but to do a whole book that way is a whole nother level, man. That's pretty cool to be able to do it that way. So I'm going to bounce around a little bit because I do want to I want to go into a little deeper dive about your writing. But so you get the contract, we get the agent, you get the contract, you get the manuscript in. Then, like, how long is it out in the public arena till you find out that it's become a bestseller? And how did you get notified that it was a bestseller?
It was almost instantaneous.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it happened literally overnight. I started getting calls from shows, and this is Good Morning America. We want to have you on. It was mind blowing. It was
Wow.
absolutely mind blowing. And also, this was back when there were book tours.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember
Mm-hmm.
doing
Sure.
the book tour, and there's a saying that I learned in writing circles: the book tour is the punishment for writing the book. It's so grueling.
That's right. Yeah, it really helps your schedule of training too, right?
Oh, it's murder on everything. Yeah, I mean, you get to these great cities and you stay in these fabulous hotels, but I mean, you get in at 11 at night, and then
Mm-hmm.
you got a call sheet that starts at 4:30 in the morning. You finish, you go to the airport, you fly to the next city, and you just repeat that,
Yeah.
rinse and repeat for like 8 or 9 days. So it's
Oh,
pretty grueling.
yeah.
But I remember doing the book tour and doing all the TV and so forth around it, and just thinking that I'm really glad I wrote this book because getting back to the original idea of running 100 miles, it opens up people's minds. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you could say you ran a
Mm-hmm.
marathon and people are like, "Oh, that's great. How far is a marathon?" They don't know.
Right.
But when you say
Right.
I ran 100 miles, like everyone, I can't even drive 100 miles. How did you do that?
Well, yeah, I think that good point taken, and it's also, I think, to your point, like how you were saying that the ultra running community was so kind of unknown and somewhat insular, and it wasn't like there's an Olympic event that's an ultra distance, and blah blah blah, and then the fact of your book coming, like the initial, like the immediate interest of Penguin, and then the immediate interest of the public, to go from, 0 to 60 in bestseller time, I mean, is also kind of interesting in thinking about how there must have been something out there that the public, had such a curiosity about this, or maybe, had heard something about it. And I think, you really kind of became the poster person or the spokesperson, for, demystifying, these ultra distances and what's the difference between an ultra and a regular marathon and things like that. So I think, there's a lot of gratitude out there for people that, learned about it, got inspired by it. And then, for those folks too that actually, put on the shoes and tied the laces and got out on the trails.
Yeah, I mean, I think it started somewhat of a trend. Maybe I was on the crest of a wave, and it kind of it kind of exploded. I mean, if you look at the numbers in ultra running, the number of participants, I mean, it is just like it's like a if you chart it over time, it's just like an arrow going straight up into the sky. I mean, it's just every year more and more people get into it, and it kind of plateaued for a while, but now ultra running is growing again like crazy. And I think it's somewhat of a backlash to technology. I have a quote, someone asked me, isn't running boring? And I said, yeah, that's why I like it.
Yeah, I mean, like back to that getting in your head, kind of thing. I mean, you and I talked off mic before, like I, generally like to listen to podcasts like when I go for a run, but it's not every time. I mean, there's some times where it's just sort of like I need to be in nature. I need to, kind of, I don't know what, just go out without an agenda or without some, mental to-do list or problem to solve, and just enjoy the run, enjoy, that process. And that's, it's maybe like you said, maybe it's sort of like a nice detoxification from technology. That's a good point.
Yeah, and also I think these 100-mile races, 100-mile or further races, how often is it that anyone, especially people, your listeners, have seen the full cycle of a day, 24 hours outside?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
how many people have been out and watched the sunrise, watch the sun move across the sky, watch the sunset, watch the moon rise, watch the moon set, and watch the sunrise the next day, all outside in nature while this is happening?
Yeah.
There's something life affirming about this. I mean, it's kind of where we came from. And we're so far removed from that now. There's something almost primordial about doing it again, and it's really it's rejuvenating to me. It's revitalizing.
Yeah, yeah. The nurturance and nourishment that I think that provides is quite different from what everybody else's lived experiences these days. So part of that too, I mean, I'm not going to go into your training regimen or your diet or anything like that, because people can just Google your name and get those tips and things. But a part of the thing around endurance sports of whatever ilk, bicycling, swimming, running, etc., have such an aspect of mental fortitude. And I'm a clinical psychologist, so I'm real into the head space of these kinds of things. What has been your process of preparing mentally for ultramarathons, or anything like in particular to keeping focused? Because I know a lot of times in ultras people will get a little hallucinate, and if you're on a trail, man, you got to watch out for going over the side of a cliff, or snagging a root or something like that. What are some of the things that you've done or that you do to manage the mental aspect of it?
One thing I do with every race is that I just go into it at the starting line with the same commitment, and that is, I'm going to try my hardest today at this event. I'm going to give it my all. No matter what happens, I'm not going to give up without my best fight. Mm-hmm. And that placates some of the pre-race jitters, because what can we do other than be the best that we are? Mm-hmm. So I don't have any expectations other than I'm going to give it my all. Like, God damn it, I'm going to try my hardest at this race, and I'm not going to give up unless they take me out of here on a stretcher. So I go into it that mindset. And then, people say, what do you think about when things get tough? And honestly, thinking is the problem. I try not to think. I try to be in the present moment of time, the here and now, and just execute my next footstep to the best of my ability. So I put on the blinders to the future. I don't question how much further is the next aid station or how much further is the finish. I don't reflect on the past. All I think about is take your next footstep to your best ability. okay, take your next footstep to the best of your ability. And it's not easy to do. I mean, our minds are so active. You know this because of your profession.
Hmm.
Even now, as you know, we're talking, you're probably thinking about what's the next question, how much time do we have left, this and that. I just literally tune all of that out, and I force myself to come back to my next footstep. And I've done this for 6, 7, 8 hours at a time. It's almost like a Zen-like state you go
Yeah,
into,
yeah.
and you can get through anything, I'm convinced, if you're just present and focus on the here and now.
That's good. It reminds me back in the day, I used to do a lot of high altitude climbs. And kind of the joke back then was because it was, I'm aging myself too, dating myself, we had beepers. And it was sort of like you don't take a beeper, on your climbing harness. and there was sort of this thing of the disconnection from not just technology like you've noted, but also just kind of all the other kinds of things. And to be in this space like you're talking about for those 6 or 7 hours, I mean, climbs, the summit and the coming back down on summit days, when it's a multi-staged climb, summit days are like, for me, were always like the ultra-focused kind of times. And it's that same kind of thing. There's a Zen-like quality and a paying attention to kinds of things. Sometimes it's weird for me, like fear would not necessarily, I'd be more afraid at the lower altitudes and stuff, even in the less steep spots than I was, at the more vertical, kinds of things where probably it was really much more, dangerous. But I think there's something to be said of what, your point of this kind of connectedness, focus, everything else kind of really does not matter, other than this next step, be it, on a trail in an ultra, or be it, in a crampon on the side of a mountaintop. So yeah, I totally get that. And speaking of that, then, man, you have not just done ultras, you have been in some of the most extreme conditions on Earth. Is there any particular race or environment that you felt was maybe most challenging, and if I'm guessing probably, what was that, and what did you take away from that experience?
Yeah, I've done so many races I've raced on all 7 continents twice. But there was one race I did. It was in the Atacama Desert, which is in South America,
Uh-huh.
in Chile,
Hmm.
and it's the driest place on earth. I remember asking one of the guys there. I said, when did it last rain? And he said it hasn't. I said, well, since when? He said, since we've been keeping records. There's never been a recorded raindrop where you're racing.
Wow.
The
Wow.
humidity was so low, yeah, and it was like a Marscape. It was 6 days self-supported, 250 kilometers. When I say self-supported, that means you have to carry everything you need in your pack. Uh, they would set up a tent for you at night for the racers, and they provide water. But as far as food, you were living on freeze-dried food, astronaut food basically.
Right.
You were sleeping in a tent where at night it was below freezing. During the day it was over 100 degrees. And it was just, I just remember, and there's no, I mean, you're not showering, there's no water for showers. So you're out there for 6 days crossing this desert. And I remember my hair was like straw. I could just break my pieces
Wow,
of my
I'm
hair off.
sure. Wow. Do
Yeah.
do you have to orient that way too, or do you kind of generally know what is it? I can't imagine that there's a 250 mile or kilometer trail or something. How do you make sure that you're not going up the side of a volcano or something instead?
Yeah, it's an actual organized race. And they put out these pink flags, line of sight. You're not allowed to use a GPS. So you've got to look for, like, you get to a pink flag, you look for the next pink flag.
Wow.
The problem is, if you're in a desert and there's a sandstorm,
Right. Yeah.
you can't see past your hand, let alone the next pink flag.
Oh my
So you spend a
gosh.
lot of time, walking around in circles looking for the next checkpoint. Yeah.
Wow. Good Lord. So, okay. And I kind of teed this up too in the intro. One of the other deserts is Antarctica that you've run. But did you lose your clothes in part of that, Dean? In some part of that? What's the backstory with
No,
that?
no. Okay. So I ran a marathon to the South Pole.
Uh-huh. As one
And
does.
Yeah, as one does, which it was a one and done sort of thing. It was supposed to be an annual event. It
Uh-huh.
was the inaugural South Pole Marathon,
Uh-huh.
and they told me there'd be 40 to 50 intrepid, adventurers from around the world all convening on the South Pole for this first ever South Pole Marathon.
Uh-huh.
There were three of us.
Two were
And
race organizers.
yeah, it was so dangerous. I mean, it was ridiculous.
Oh.
But it's one of those things. I was supposed to be home in 10 days, and 30 days later, I stumbled through the door.
Oh my
It was one of
gosh.
those things where we got weathered in down there. It was catastrophe after catastrophe. And yeah, but anyway, I finished this marathon, and at the South Pole, there's actually a South Pole, like a candy stripe barber pole with this stainless steel orb on top of the South Pole. And I'm sitting there staring at this South Pole, and a guy comes up to me and says, "Wow, that was amazing. You're the first guy to run a marathon on the South Pole. Do you want to run around the world naked?" And I said, "Bob, you've been spending a little too much time down the South Pole, buddy. You need to get out of here
Right,
once in a while."
exactly.
And he said, "No, think about it." He said, "I'm an engineer. If you run around the South Pole, you're circumnavigating the globe just at its smallest circumference." And I'm like, yeah, it makes sense. But I said, "But it's minus 30 degrees." And he said, "Just don't let your appendage touch that stainless steel orb on top and you'll be fine." So I stripped to my boots and I ran around the South Pole. I ran around the world naked.
Now, there's
How many people can claim that?
That's
Yeah.
right. That's the ultimate bucket list check mark.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's hysterical. That is so good. So in the context of all these, so I was talking about like harsh environments and stuff. So would the one in Chile, would that be
Atacama. Yeah.
yeah, would that be the hardest you would say so far, or is there something that even tops that? I mean, it certainly sounds like a crazy challenge, just trying to figure out which direction you're supposed to go in.
Yeah. I mean, I think I think you mentioned one time I ran 50 marathons in all of the 50 U.S. states in 50 consecutive days,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that one was probably the most mentally challenging because it was so protracted.
Yeah.
I remember running a marathon in Arizona in Phoenix, and it was really hot, and I got to the halfway point, and I thought I'm not going to finish this marathon, and that was marathon 19.
Oh boy.
And I thought, you got to get up for 31 more mornings and do the same thing. Like, there's no way you're going to make it. It was just overwhelming. And I used that same technique at that point. I said, don't think about 31 more marathons. Think about your next footstep.
Wow.
Don't think about tomorrow. Don't think about dinner. Just think about your next footstep, buddy. Like, get yourself together and be here and now.
That's amazing. So, all right. So I'm gonna bounce around all over the place. I'm gonna shift out of running for just a second. It'll still have some overlap to it, but again, in the bio intro, you're a global ambassador of Greek tourism. And is it true, if my facts again, fact check, you wrote your master's thesis on an aspect of Greek history. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I have a couple graduate degrees, and one of them is in classics.
Okay.
So I studied the original marathon, which
Uh-huh.
was in 490 BC in Marathon, Greece. There's an actual township in Greece called Marathon, and a foot herald by the name of Phidippides ran after the Battle of Marathon to the Acropolis, and he proclaimed Nike, Nike, or we say Nike, Nike, which means victory, victory in Greek. He
Uh-huh.
said, "We are victorious," and then he died. And that's where Phil Knight got the name of his sportswear company, his footwear company, Nike, by the way.
Wow. So
So I did, yeah. I mean, I researched his story. I wanted to know the history. I wanted to know everything that happened, how this could take place, what path did he follow, and so forth.
and then you did a run in honor of that, right? An homage to that.
What I learned is the backstory was before running the final marathon. He ran from Athens to a Greek city-state called Sparta.
Uh-huh.
So if you've seen the movie 300, you know who was the most badass fighting force in
Right.
ancient Greece. It
Exactly.
was the
Yeah.
Spartans, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So he ran, it was more like 140 miles to Sparta to recruit the Spartans because the Persians had landed the Bay of Marathon, which is near Athens, and the Athenians were not fighters. I mean, the Athenians were philosophers and architects and mathematicians, astronomers, but they weren't fighters. So
Mm-hmm.
they sent this herald to run to Sparta to recruit the Spartans. He made it to Sparta. Somehow he made it within a day and within 36 hours, essentially. The record said he arrived the day after setting off.
Wow.
So back in 490 BC, a man ran 140 miles within 36 hours. He got to Sparta. He said to King Leonidas, we've been invaded. Come help the Athenians, or Greece is going to fall to the Persians. And the Spartans agreed to that, but they said, but there's one hitch. We can't leave until the moon is full, because our religion forbids us for leaving for war unless it's a full moon. And that wasn't for 6 more days. So this runner got up the next morning and said, I got to go tell my brethren in Athens that the Spartans are coming, but they're going to be delayed. So he ran all the way back to Athens the next day. And yeah, and then he heard that, the troops had deployed to Marathon, and he ran to Marathon and told the general, hey, the Spartans are coming, but it's not going to be for 6 days. The general decided the Persians are like fortifying their position every hour. Like, we can't wait for 6 days. So the Athenians attacked the Persians. They somehow won this amazing battle. And if you're into battle tactics, read about the Battle of Marathon. It was like the tactical approach they took is legendary in war theory. But anyway, after that was his final run to the Acropolis when he died.
Wow.
So I learned about this backstory, and I thought, I got to try this original run to Sparta. Yeah.
So you did that, and then you wrote a book about it, right? The Road to Sparta. That's about that
The Road to
experience.
Sparta.
And
It
you
is.
and
Yeah.
you were being Mr. Authentic in this, right? I mean, you ran in like little leather strips for shoes, and you mimicked the diet that would have been the diet of the time and stuff. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I wanted to try to, because I'm going to write a book about this guy doing this. So I kind of wanted to try to reproduce as much of what he was feeling as possible.
Hmm.
So, the ancient Greek foot heralds, they were called hemodromi, or day-long runners in Greek. They ate like a beef jerky, like a dried meat.
Uh-huh.
They ate olives and figs, and they ate this sports concoction they called pastilli, which is mashed up sesame seeds with honey. It was like a paste.
Mm-hmm.
So I used these same foods, and I only drank water. I didn't drink, heat or
Mm-hmm.
perpetuum or anything like that. I just drank water, and it was interesting. Interesting.
It was
you know,
an experience, huh?
well, like I'd done these 7 or 8 hour training runs eating only figs,
Uh-huh.
and I thought the figs are great fuel. They are for 8 or 9 hours max, but for 24 hours, why you eat figs.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not regular, you
Yep.
eat figs to become regular. Well, when you're running, 153 miles, you don't want to be regular.
Right.
So
Right.
I was running with a roll of toilet paper stuck under my loincloth.
Wow, wow. It's just, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of folks might have known that, like the classic thing, hence the genesis of the word marathon. But the whole, Sparta aspect of it, I think, is just really. I mean, again, it's inspirational in the fact that you know, you could have done it totally as as an academic and, as a thesis kind of, piece and whatnot that would have been good and important and educational. But then the whole fact to kind of take it to the next level and do it this way, again, is just like an inspiration to people. It's curious to people, and the gift that you give to people of then, explaining it and going through it, I think is really, again, kind of one of those tip of the hat to Dean, we appreciate it kind of thing. So thank you. What an experience, boy.
Well,
So,
and I tried to bring it into modern times, because so many of our practices are from ancient Greece. We don't even realize. I mean, the term trophy,
uh,
trophy in Greek means the turning point. So whenever there was a battle and the Greeks won, at the point where they turned the enemy around to retreat, they would collect all the discarded armament and weapons from the enemy, and they'd pile it high at that point.
huh.
And that's where we get the modern word trophy.
I
Is
did not
from
know that. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And again, it's like when you take these kinds of, I mean, even thinking about like Sparta and all the things with that and the things we might read in books or learn in school or see in movies or whatever. But then, now there's the Spartan races and there's, all these kinds of, as if, just regular, running wasn't enough or marathons weren't enough or ultras weren't enough, then obstacle course races and, all these other kinds of, I did a piece for LinkedIn a while back called Weirdo Challenges, where there's tank lifting or tank curling, and all there's the 100-ton
Yeah.
club and, things like that. So I think, it's these, maybe people trying to scratch their itch, get off the couch, not, be so glued to their devices and, go out and, experience something. And I think it's always nice to be able to do it if it can be in the, some kind of charitable aspect or, thing that goes along with it as well. So, okay, good. So I want to shift again, Dean. So I'm not going to go into, like I said, training advice and things like that. I can never mimic you or, and advice is hard. It's hard to be generalizable and things like that. But I want to pick your brain about 5 areas: writing, which we've already touched on. I got a couple more questions around that. Business, marriage and family, humanitarian works and diplomacy, and just everyday life. So are you up for that? Are you good for time? Can we dive
Yeah,
into
we
some of
can,
those?
yeah, let's
Awesome.
just do it.
Good. So I'm going to circle back with the thing we've already got a little bit of a start with, and that's writing. So I believe by my tally, there's at least 5 books. I'm just going to call them out. We'll have them in the show notes. Ultramarathon Man, like you said, subtitled Confessions of an All-Night Runner. 50-50, The Secrets I Learned Running 50 Marathons in 50 Days. Road to Sparta, which we were just talking about, subtitled Reliving the Ancient Battle and Epic Run That Inspired the World's Greatest Foot Race. Run, 26.2, which I love, 26.2 Stories of Blisters and Bliss. Chicken Soup for the Soul, Running for Good, 101 stories for runners and walkers to get you moving. Runner's High, subtitled My Life in Motion, and Running Wild, Inspirational Trails from Around the World. So you told us the story about, kind of the convincing the agent in some, fairly cool, unique way about being that, that first writer. Did that then help prime the pump for subsequent book deals? Or tell us, you've shared the story behind the ultra marathon man. How about this cascade of some of these others, 50-50 and Road to Sparta? How was that then getting those book deals? Same publisher? Did you farm it out with an agent? What were the mechanics behind that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the very first agent that I had, Carol Bidnick, I've been with her the whole time. So she's represented me in all my books. They've been with different publishers. The publishing world has consolidated like everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
Penguin merged with Random House, the Penguin Random House. Harper Collins is one of my publishers, so Harper Books. But she oversees all of my book deals. Right on the subject of writing, I would tell any writer to start with Homer, with the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Uh-huh.
That is the best writing that exists, and it was like the first piece of written literature. And the beauty of it, it wasn't written. There was an oral tradition, like it's lyrical. Like when you read the lines, it's almost like a Bob Dylan lyric of a song.
Mm-hmm.
Every verse is like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I say start with those 2 books, and you also notice that in the storytelling, Homer engages the senses. Like when I write my books and I talk about a running story, you've got to pull the reader in by engaging the sense of smell. Explain what it smells like.
Mm-hmm.
What are you seeing? What does it feel like? What are you feeling? What are you hearing? By describing all those things in great detail, you can pull someone into a story and it gets them more engaged. So I've learned how to write. Like the most common reaction I get by a non-runner that reads my book is, "Oh, it didn't suck." They think, an athlete's going to write a stupid, shallow book,
Right,
and
right.
they read my book and like, it's actually kind of good.
Oh, that's a good litmus test.
Yeah.
So, and I know also in your CV, you've written historically like magazine columns and stuff like too, like Men's Health, for example. So, what was that like? Did you have to pitch them? Did they come to you and say, "Hey, man, we know you're bona fides. We'd love to have you do a column." How did those kinds of things come about?
Yeah, they've all come in to me. I've they've invited me. They either want to take an excerpt of my book or they want me to write a specific story on a specific topic.
Mm-hmm.
So I love to write, and I love making the time
Mm-hmm.
just to do nothing but write. To focus on one thing, which is so rare these days. So I read a monthly column for Ultrarunning magazine, which is kind of a small niche publication. But I can't tell you the responses I always get to my articles. I mean,
Oh,
people you develop a loyal following. Like, people like your voice, like
yeah.
you resonate with certain people, and they like hearing. And so I kept telling them, okay, this is my last year. No, come on, just one more year. All right, this is my last year. One more year. So
That,
I'm still writing. I think I'll be writing longer than I'm running.
that's good. And not to steal from elsewhere, but I have also heard with I can't give attribution to which podcast. I'm guessing maybe it was Rich Roll, but you talked about your writing process in the sense of like you would write for a bit and then you would go like do some body weight exercises or some calisthenics or something and then kind of come back. Do you still do that? And if so, how do you mix and match like a day in the life of a writing day for you with, also not just being, 10 hours at a desk?
I do. I never sit down. I think that I do all my writing standing up. I have a standing desk. I've had a standing desk for a long time,
Hmm.
and I also I do these little like hit training routine. I have this 12 to 14-minute hit training routine I do in between writing. So you can only stare at a screen for so long.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll just go do, and it's all body weight.
Uh-huh.
It's push-ups. I have a pull-up bar in my office, pull-ups, burpees, sit-ups. So I'll do a quick round of hit training, and then I'll go back and as you're doing the hit training, inevitably you're thinking about your word crafting, or
Hmm.
you're forming the next sentence, or where do I want to take the story now? So you're doing a lot of thinking, to your previous point, motion stirs emotion. Once you start moving,
Mm.
the creative juices start flowing. So that's exactly the process I follow for writing.
Gotcha. Good. So then let's segue into the business stuff. And this is maybe kind of a natural because I know that, or I think, did you sell or license? I'm not even sure the right way to say this. Movie rights to a documentary about you, or tell us, or a feature. Tell us about the movie rights project or projects.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I don't know the movie making business, but I kind of took my shot at writing a script. And writing a movie script is very much different than writing a book.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more telling the director of what the scene, and then some lines, that kind of thing.
Right.
So I have a representative who's shopping it around, and there's been a lot of interest. These things take time, as I've learned.
Oh yeah.
So finding the right home for it, and finding the right actors and the right voice is going to be a process. But I've kept like creative control of how the story is told, because
Good.
I've seen Holly. Yeah, I mean, I've
Yeah.
seen like I'm a surfer as well,
Uh-huh.
and there are so many cheesy Hollywood surfing movies. Like, no
Yeah.
legitimate surfer would ever say what that guy just said.
Right.
And
Yeah.
this guy, come on, he spends more time in the gym than he does in the water. So it's like I didn't want to make a stupid running film. I wanted to be legit and kind of hardcore.
Hmm. And is it a biopic per se, or is it based on true events, or is it just talking about the athleticism with like not Dean as being the character?
No, right now it's basically based on my first experience at Western States.
Oh,
So it's some
okay.
of the stories I just told you about stumbling out of the bar. It's kind of like a life story, but finishing with the first time I finished Western States. And in the movie, it's called Western Trails because,
Uh-huh.
Western States doesn't really say so much to a general audience. But if you say
Mm-hmm.
Western Trails, they know it's like a trail in the West.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's based on like a snippet of time.
That's cool. That I can't. Well, keep us posted with that, so that I keep my thumb on the pulse. But there's also, would you call it a documentary or a profile of you too? That's available out there too, right?
Yeah, no, there's been a couple documentaries where I've been the main subject. One is it's just called Ultramarathon Man,
Uh huh.
and it was the 50 marathons in 50 states in 50 days. And
Gotcha.
it's a really good movie. I mean, it was a small production company that put it together, JB Bennett.
Uh huh.
It was interesting. Uh, Nat Geo, this is when Nat Geo was doing this sort of programming, had bought rights to cover the 50 marathons in 50 states in 50 days.
Huh.
And 2 days before, like the CEO said, no, we're not gonna green light this. This guy's never gonna make it. Like they thought we're
We're
gonna
gonna waste all this footage.
yeah, exactly. We're gonna go have sell commercial time, and this guy's gonna make it for 5 or 6 marathons. And it's gonna be over.
Oh,
So yeah, so this kind of scrappy, young videographer said, "I'll come along on the ride," and he
wow.
did a really good job with it. I mean, even now when I watch it, it's got an original soundtrack, and you can watch it on YouTube. It's just called Ultra Marathon Man.
Okay.
And then there's another documentary called The Road to Sparta about my run to from Athens to Sparta. I'm one of four characters. I'm the main character, but it's good as well. It's dramatic. It's unexpected. It's good. Both the guys that did the films are really creative individuals. They're kind of introverts,
Uh
so
huh.
they have some strong skills. They're not good at marketing,
Mm.
but they're really good at telling a story, and they did a good job with both of them.
Good. Well, we'll try and help them out on the marketing side of things. I'll get links in the show notes for these. So I don't know if this is still in that same area. I in my head think about it in the Venn diagram of business overlapping with your life and activities. You, I'm just going to say these all out as a category, and you can kind of pick them apart as you care to. So, like getting sponsored, you've been involved with startups, you do endorsements, you do licensing. I know, like we've already said, you've got deals with Hammer. You've done stuff with CBD, wine, tea, oils, lotions. Step us through the maze of sponsorships, licensing, entrepreneurship in your life.
I wish I could.
Oh.
I wish there was some logic to it, but
Here's the 5 steps to.
yeah, no, I mean, I think the best quality I could assign to a business person, a young aspiring business person, is curiosity.
Okay.
Like, I'm just really curious, and it drives some people crazy, but I like to find out about things, and and I have a lot of people pitch me an ideas, and some of them I think are crazy.
Uh-huh.
Some are think, this, this, I want to invest in this company, or I want to be sponsored. I want to promote this company. So it just, it's curious, seek out opportunities, learn about them. If you're curious about one particular topic or subject, even if that's, basket weaving, you don't have to be specializing in AI like everyone else. I mean, be the best darn basket weaver there is. And you'll have a very fulfilling career, and you'll make a go of it. I mean, so do what you love, be curious, and just follow your passion, and I think you'll be successful.
That's good. Well, and then have the chops to deliver on it as well too. So, all right, good.
People say, "How do you get so motivated to do these things?" If you love something, the motivation comes naturally.
Yeah.
I don't have to force myself to go on a run. I
Yeah.
mean, some days I do, but
Hmm.
mostly I love it. So doing
Yeah.
what you love it's not hard to motivate for that.
Yeah. I did uh, when I was dabbling in the ultra world, I did a double marathon, and it was trails and whatnot. And I just was kind of just doing it on my own, self-supported. Not a big deal. Double, it's a easy workout probably in your world. But I told my daughter, I said we were counting down to the day that it was going to start, and I said, I get to run all day today. it wasn't like I have to run or it's like, it's this thing I've been dreading or anything like that. And it just really, kind of turns it around 180 degrees that this is a gift. This is something that, I get to be in nature. I get to, focus on things, blah, 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 and, not be bothered by the screens and work and demands and responsibilities for a certain period of time. And, it's nourishing. It's rejuvenating. So I totally get that. So speaking of daughters and marriage and family and stuff, fact check, childhood sweetheart, is that who is your wife? Is that correct?
Yeah, I married my high school sweetheart,
That's so cool.
and we have two great kids. Yeah,
And
yeah.
she's a dentist and realtor last time I checked. Is that still
She
what
was
she's up to?
yes, yes,
Gotcha. And
yes, and I mean, when people say, how much sacrifice did you have to make when you had kids? And sure, there's sacrifices. I mean, every parent that wants to run a marathon or do an Ironman who has young kids, you're going to train at night. You're going to train early in the morning. Like my family always came first,
mm-hmm.
but I brought my family everywhere. And not only that, I tried to make it pleasant for them. I didn't want them to think, oh, Dad's going to drag us to another marathon, next weekend.
Uh-huh.
I would literally get one time I'd get a nice hotel. I'd plan a lot of activities other than the running,
That's great.
that they enjoyed. Yeah. And the run would just be part of it.
Nice.
So that way they look forward to every time I went running, and they came along, they would look forward to where we're going next kind of thing.
That is a great tip. That is really brilliant. I always struggled with that when I was doing more international climbs, and I did all of those. My wife and I were married for a period of time before we had kids, and once we had kids, it sort of didn't diminish my desire to keep climbing, but my wife did. And she said, you can go on climbs, but they all have to be, within the United States. So I was like, okay, fair enough, kind of a thing. And I always kind of felt too that there was a certain level, this is just me, that, the training for a climb, which for me just included primarily just lots of running, but, like you said, it's early mornings or it's late at night or it's, whatever, and that's time away, but you always try and do it while everybody else is asleep, so they didn't really notice maybe. But, I also then tried to do it as you have done as well, like sponsoring some kind of cause or something. So we developed through my nonprofit something called Summits for Others. So every time I would, go on a climb, it would be a sponsorship thing. We did sponsorships, for my charity. We did sponsorships for War Child and other kinds of things. And that also just kind of helped make it feel like it was more community awareness, building. And I know that for you, community and support, have really kind of gone hand in hand with all of your, experiences and endeavors and stuff. Do your kids run, or did they just leave that up to Dad, or if I can ask? I mean, I don't want to pry, but we were talking off mic about, and both my kids are runners, by the way. So, how about for you?
Yeah, my kids run. They're not like they don't run competitively, but they both run because they just love to run. They love,
Mm-hmm.
to clear their head kind of thing.
Yeah.
My daughter and I have run a half marathon
Nice.
together. My son and I ran a marathon and an a 50 kilometer race together. So they've done some racing but they mostly just run, for the health benefits
Yeah.
and for the mental health benefits.
It's
Yeah.
it's so nice. I was, again, off mic. I was sharing with you that I was talking with a dear friend who's just a world class triathlete, Sarah Fix, and
Yeah,
we
I
were,
know Sarah, sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
Sarah's awesome,
Yeah.
and she was saying, and we were talking about how, back in the day when we were all kids, it wasn't like our parents, were going to go out on the little league field and play baseball with us, or something. Maybe we played
Yeah.
catch, or maybe we tossed a football, but, or maybe we played tennis. But, the fact that, there's these, dial it up from 5K to, whatever, these kinds of things where now, parents and kids can, kind of run, or there's the little fun run before the 5K. So at least everybody's out there and they got a race bib or whatever. I love that other aspect of that, with the community of, of running, of, whatever kind of distance it is. It's the inclusiveness of it of all ages, all, shapes, sizes, generations, speeds, lack of speed for me, that kind of a thing. So I think that's cool. I'm looking at my desk here too. I just have to mention this too. I don't think I put the date on it, but in the last couple of weeks, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal, and it talked about, the title was Marathon Running Sets Milestones. And one of the things they noted was that the Paris Marathon set a record for the biggest marathon number of finishers ever at 54,175. And again, I think I can't help but say, I think you got a little bit to do with that, Dean. So, bringing this kind of awareness just to running, and that sort of a thing. And again, like you said, maybe it's this, there's a backlash of people wanting to be out, be away from their screens. The Paris Marathon is not in nature, but it's outdoors, and it's there's community, around those kinds of things, and you can always find whatever your little niche is of a community of runners, nowadays, from whatever kind of distance. So anyway,
yeah. Oh no, I mean, running is experiencing right now. I get a lot of industry reports and analysis, and running is exploding right now. All distances. But I mean, you talked about the Paris Marathon, the London Marathon, 2025 London Marathon.
Uh-huh.
They had slots for about 48,000 runners.
Uh-huh.
Within 24 hours of opening registration, they had over 850,000 applications.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, these big marquee marathons, all of them.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to get into them now. Some people curse me. They're like,
what have you done? Careful what you.
Yeah. I can't even get into this race. I'm in this lottery. Wow. I've been applied for 5 years. I haven't been able to get into the damn race.
Well, again, I guess that's the downside. Yeah, I get it. I don't have any quick solutions for that, but yeah, it's
there's more. There's a lot more races. I mean, sure, London, Paris, New York, these big marquee marathons will always, be iconic events people want to do, but there are so many small. I mean, I'm doing in a couple of weeks. It's called the White Marble Marathon in Tuscany, Italy. It's a great course. I mean, they've got a lot of availability, and people just don't know about it yet. Mm-hmm. But I think the more people that get into running, the better.
Yeah.
I think it's universally. I mean, runners, they appreciate the environment more because they're breathing the air. Mm-hmm. They're good consumers. They're usually very considerate of each other. They're humble, because running has a way of humbling you, no matter how arrogant you are. You're not going to sprint 100 miles, buddy. Whatever. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, it is very humbling. So, okay, I want to be conscientious of your time, and maybe this last area to focus on, because it's really kind of an itch that I wanted to scratch. I've kind of referenced this as well too, of pardon me, your humanitarian works and your work in sports diplomacy. So you've done awareness and fundraising in some of your races for causes. That's that was kind of your origin story back with that high school event and 105 laps on the track and all that. How was it that you then got to be a U.S. athlete ambassador, if that's the right term? You've done 3 separate sports diplomacy envoys, to my knowledge, in Central Asia and South America. How did that start? And unpack that. What's that like, doing that?
Yeah, I got invited to run across the ancient Silk Road for the 25-year anniversary of U.S. diplomatic relations with 3 former Soviet bloc countries, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan.
Of course.
All countries, yeah. And wow. I learned that it was John, John Kerry was the Secretary of State. Uh-huh. He was a big cyclist, and originally it was like 525 kilometers between the 3 capital cities of those countries. Uh-huh. And it was all in the ancient Silk Road, which I'm fascinated with, because it was Alexander the Great that first pioneered that route. And he's Greek like me, but anyway, they said, well, he can't do the ride. I think he had a bum hip or something. Uh-huh. And they said, maybe you can do it. And I thought, well, I'm not a cyclist. And they said, well, you can run. So I signed up for this event. Yeah. And it was remarkable. I mean, I was going to these, locations where they'd never seen an American. And here's this guy on foot, high-fiving them. Like they were just these people are like, here's an American, he's going to high-five me. Oh my God. It was, and I had, it was so beautiful because running is such a universal activity. I mean, there's so many things in this world that divide us, right? You talked about some before, the color of our skin, the God we worship, our language, our socioeconomic level. But running is something that is universal. It unites us. It's, we all run the same way and we can all run. So I had tens of thousands of people run with me, villagers that come out and they'd run 200 meters with me. Some people would run
Oh.
half a day with me.
Oh.
But it was across these, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan, which were great countries. I never saw one McDonald's, not one Starbucks. I mean, if you want to get away from America,
Yeah.
go to Kyrgyzstan.
No
Yeah.
kidding. Wow.
And it was so successful. They recruited me a couple more times. I did one in Peru, same sort of thing, sports diplomacy, and also in Fiji.
It's great. I mean, I think of those maybe just in the context of like a more so team sports, but I had no idea until researching, this part of your background that was just, even something that, someone like you could go and do these kinds of things. So that's also, again, very inspirational just from a whole nother, humanitarian, we are the world kind of thing. That is just awesome. So
yeah, well, I mean, I want to give some of the credit to, the team at the U.S. Department of State, because this falls in the category of soft diplomacy, and you're right. It was primarily teams and exhibitions, and I said those are great spectator sports, but let's have a participant sport. Like instead of having them sit in the arena and watch some soccer players or basketball players, let's get them out running with me.
Yeah.
And they said that's a great idea. Let's try this. Yeah.
And also then it makes it not a competitive thing. I mean, if everybody's sitting in the arena, you're going to be, cheering for your side and then feel kind of bad if your side loses or something, and it can kind of not necessarily backfire, but it's a totally different thing than to do it in the context of, come along, run with me. It's not like you're going to toss the ball out into the seats and have someone come on, onto the court and start, doing free throws or something from whatever country you're in. So I just.
Yeah. And you're right. It's always, when there's a team, you're always going to root for your team. It's
right.
A little bit divisive. It's a little divisive, even if it's, an exhibition.
Yep.
Where when you're running, you're united. It's such a different dynamic. Yeah. Anyway, they obviously they liked it because I've done it 3 times, and we're talking about doing a 4th.
Good.
Maybe in 2026. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Let's keep in touch. Keep me posted with that. So I would love to help publicize awareness of that kind of thing. And it's a very perfect fit with some of the. I'm actually just now working with a new entity that's working on building schools in Kyrgyzstan. So
Kyrgyzstan,
so we need to keep in touch. So last kind of chunk of questions, just everyday life. What is there, if there is a typical day, or make it an amalgam, what would a typical day or week look like for you when you aren't training for an upcoming race?
I don't wish I had a typical day or week.
Okay, yeah. No such thing.
I can't. I mean, no. My brother gets up every day at the same time. He goes to the same office. He's such a man of routine. I can't. Routine just takes the life out of me. I mean, it vitalizes him. To me, it kills me.
Sure.
Routine. So
yeah.
I like to never run the same path 2 days in a row. There's always physical activity involved. I think, a healthy body, healthy mind.
Yeah.
I think you'd prescribe to that as well. So there's always some form of physical activity involved. There really is no typical day. I mean, I drink coffee. People say you drink coffee. Yeah, I drink coffee. I have a glass of wine now and then. I mean, I'm not abstaining from alcohol. I'm not a vegan. I mean, I eat meat. I have a pretty clean diet, but there really is there's no typical day. I mean, every day is a little twist and turn, a little bit different. I might be doing, a book signing one day and then, writing a column the next, and then, doing a sponsor event over the weekend. So
gotcha.
I've lived, I sometimes I guess I take it for granted and I don't want to. I've lived a really great life. I've got to do so many things, and it's been so spirited and entertaining and fulfilling, adventurous. every time I think, okay, that was great, I get more invitations.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. That's
I
good.
think
Yeah,
my
yeah.
finish lines are, yeah,
Yeah,
my finish lines,
way ahead of you. There is
my,
no finish line, Dean.
no, I think my finish line's a pine box. Yeah, I
Right.
mean,
Yeah. That's right. That's right. Well, and just to kind of, I mean, this sort of is a veiled reference to, to age and whatnot. Again, doing background, one of the things that you've noted is that you've written about it too, blisters and chafing and toenail loss and all those kinds of things. And, I mean, they're not fun, but they're not sidelining injuries. But the last I heard, you've really never had anything much worse than those kinds of things. Is that streak maintaining?
it's remarkable. Yeah,
It
and over
is.
30, well, I say over 30 years of running, but I mean 30 years of running ultramarathons, but a lifetime of running because as we
Yeah.
talked about, I started when I was a kid.
Right.
I've never had a running related injury.
Wow. Wow. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm guessing, nature, nurture, biology, blah, blah, blah. But I know too, because I stalk you and watch your reels and things, that there's a lot of, and as you mentioned, like even in your writing process, there's a lot of, whatever kind of cross training and things like that. Are those maybe kind of the secret sauce then as the aging process and continuing to, do these kinds of distances and do these different kinds of events that has maintained, it makes me so sad. I've known so many people that says, well, I don't run anymore because I'm worried about my knees, or I don't run anymore because I, did this or that, because of my hip or because of, whatever. But, I mean, again, it's hard to generalize to other people with different bodies and different lifestyles and different whatevers. But, what's your estimate of the ability to remain injury free that might be generalizable to the rest of us mortals?
I think there's not one thing I do. I think it's everything. I think, I encourage people to look at their life through the lens of being the best animal they can be. So, it's not just training. I mean, it's cross training as well. It's diet, it's sleep, it's interpersonal relationships. Try to optimize all of those things to be the best beast you can be. And I try to do that. And, as far as running related injuries, I think some of it does come down to, biomechanics, like heredity, like, you acquire your biomechanics
Yeah.
from, there's a saying, the best thing you can do as a long distance runner is to choose your parents well. So I think,
That's good.
but yeah, I think, I mean, I'm 100% Greek, and my dad always insists we came from the same village, in the hills of Greece, that the original marathoner, Phidippides, came from. And I tell him, Dad, we grew up in Southern California. I mean, what village in Greece are we chasing goats around? Come on. I grew up surfing in the beach. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So, Dean, we've covered a lot of territory. You've been very generous with your time today, but are there any areas that we haven't covered or anything I've missed that you'd like to add before we wrap?
No, I think this has been a fantastic conversation. I think that, I've given people a glimpse of who I am and what I'm about. And, I applaud you for providing the forum that I can do that. But, if people are interested in learning more about me, you just Google my name. I mean, I'm on social media. I've got a website. So I try to be visible, and the content that I create, it always is, it's trying to give something back to the viewer. Like, I don't just post stuff about me pounding my chest. I always try to come up with a quote that I saw that I really liked and post that. Or, if there's something I learned, in my training, or some, exercise or whatever, I try to share that.
Mm-hmm.
And, I always encourage people, to your earlier point, listen to me, listen to what I'm doing, listen to everyone, follow no one. So get a lot of different points, of reference, and then find out what works best for you.
That's good. And I'll just underline that. I mean, again, like I said, I track you all over the place, and it's Now that you said that, it now occurs to me that, so oftentimes you're showcasing somebody else in your feeds and stuff. And I think, again, that just, kind of speaks to the kind of person you are. And it's not just, a me kind of thing. So that's also pretty impressive considering, what your credentials are. So well, this has been great. I want to let you get back to your life. I want to publicly thank you for your time and your insights and making time for our conversation. You're an inspirational gift to millions over multiple generations, and you've done so since high school, at 105 laps. You always have a gentlemanly presence, and you do everything you do with grace and gratitude, and I just want to thank you for all that, Dean.
I appreciate those kind words, and one day let's share some footsteps together. That'd be even better.
Awesome. As a reminder, listeners can read a summary of this episode and links to the show notes via my LinkedIn Top Voice Companion article, along with past guests as well. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I have, and I hope it will help you in your journey to living your life in full. Until next time. Living a Life in Full is a production of Stout Media, a subsidiary of Gordian Knot, LLC. Assistant producer, Gracie Wong. Music, Dan O'Brien. Executive producer and host, Dr. Chris Stout. To learn more, stop by our website, A Life in Full, for show notes. And please recommend us to your friends and subscribe on your favorite platform. And as for the obligatory disclaimer, this podcast is for general information uses only and does not constitute the practice of psychology, medicine, nutrition, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical or psychological advice. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, I take conflicts of interest seriously. For all of my disclosures as well as show notes, please see livingalifeinfull.org/podcast and my LinkedIn profile. Thanks, and until next time.